anxiety is great within me. Many of you know I'm Mr. Rabbi Yossi's son, and I will be sharing the message with us today. The message is called Understanding the Time. We're dismissing the children. The children can go back. The message is Understanding the Times. And before I start, last night I talked to my sister on the phone, and leave it to a sister to give you the words that you need to hear. And of course, my dad's sister is here today. I'm very happy to have her here with us. She said, I told her I was really worried about this. I was, stressing out. So she told me that, I was once foolish so I could be wise. I was once foolish so I could be smart. And that God is going to speak through me today. So I pray that today. And I'm going to start out with Psalm 19:14. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. And let's have an emphasis on God being our rock. Remember that for later, okay? Write it down. God is our rock. You can go to the next slide. But, before I go into that, I have a really good joke for us today. Take after my father, what can I say? Well, this is a good one. So pay attention. And this is good because it has to do with an elderly woman. We have a lot of elderly here. So. A rabbi visits an elderly woman from the congregation. As he sits on the couch, he notices a large bowl of peanuts on the coffee table. Mind if I have a few, he asks. No, not at all, the woman replied. They chat for an hour, and as the rabbi stands to leave, she realized that instead of eating just a few peanuts, he empties most of the bowl. I'm terribly sorry for eating all your peanuts. I really just meant to eat a few. Oh, that's all right, the woman says. Ever since I lost my teeth, all I can do is suck the chocolate off of them. All right, with that said, that's going to be our theme. We're going to uncover things today, okay? We're going to cover a lot of things. But we're going to be going over a large range of things today. And perhaps a lot of things we're going to talk about today, a lot of people don't discuss and don't talk about. And that's why I felt God led me this way to sharing this message with you. Now, if you would turn to 1 Chronicles 12:32. You don't have to. It's all up there. Can you see up here? Well. And the Bible talks about, numerous times all throughout the Bible, about certain periods where men understood the times and what they were to do. In 1 Chronicles 12:32, it says, in Israel, at the time of King Saul, there was a spirit of change. I'm sorry, this is what I'm saying. Among the hearts of the Israelites. Hundreds of thousands of young men had arisen to make a straight path for the coming King David. In 1 Chronicles 12:32, it says, from Issachar, men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. 200 chiefs with all their relatives in their command. The men of Issachar understood the time for the coming king was at hand. They understood the times and what Israel was to do. And this is going to be our theme today. Do we understand the times and what we are to do as believers? You can go to the next slide. In Ezekiel 37, the Valley of Dry Bones, what has become one of my favorite prophecies, it is my favorite prophecy. Ezekiel is touched by the Spirit of God, and he sees a vision of what I believe is to be the Holocaust and the rebirth of Israel. In Ezekiel 37:1-6, it says, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out of the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth and among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley. The bones were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Of course, later on, it goes to affirm that the dry bones are indeed the nation of Israel. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, that's me up there. When I was a younger man of 19, I got to experience these dry bones that came to life just 59 years prior to my moving to Israel in 2007. I got to live on a kibbutz. I got to eat shawarma. And if anyone's been to Israel, it's out of this world, the shawarma. I got to swim in waterfalls. I got to experience the beautiful country. I joined the IDF in August of 2017. And after a couple years of service, my excitement about life unfortunately soon turned into depression. My joy and longing for God had faded, and I replaced those things with the things of the world. And as we saw, the men from Issachar were ready to follow King David. There was a time in my life when I would have followed Saul over King David. I fell so hard, I eventually wound up in military prison for 84 days. Yeah, it was a tough time. I had become increasingly self-destructive and had everything taken away from me at that time. Of course, now, more and more I see why this happened. And I see it increasingly more and more every day. And the simple answer was I was asleep. I was asleep. And God needed to do something to wake me up. I was in what I call the matrix of Satan, an alternate reality created by Satan and of the world. God truly had to do something drastic in order to awaken me from this alternative reality of Satan. The Lord had brought me to complete brokenness so he would be the one to build me up again. And if I may give you some personal advice, let me get some water real quick. Don't make God take you to that low place again, because he will. In Ezekiel 37, this is the end of the chapter we just read before. It says, "My servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children's children will live there forever, and David, my servant, will be their prince forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and I will put my sanctuary among them. My dwelling place will be with them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And the nations will know that I am the Lord who makes Israel holy, when my sanctuary is among them forever." At the beginning of Ezekiel 37, it talks about the rebirth of Israel as a nation, as we read from the dry bones. By the end of the chapter, it talks about Yeshua reigning over that same rebirth nation. I'm here to tell you that we lie somewhere in between this chapter, probably closer to the end of this chapter, to the return of our King, than you think. I believe I was broken for this reason. I believe all of you were as well, and I believe everybody in this room was born for such a time as this. You can go to the next slide. But as for you, Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, and one of my favorite books is Daniel. I love Daniel. There's so much knowledge in there. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. So basically, he's saying that certain things will only be revealed to us when knowledge is increased. We'll only be able to understand these things when knowledge is increased. And you can go to the next slide. The world is becoming very knowledgeable, is it not? Interestingly enough, more information has become known to man in the past couple of years, and it's slowly becoming months, than all of human history combined. More collective data has been collected in the past few hours than entire centuries. 10 years from now, we will be 1,000 times more technologically advanced than we are now. In 20 years, 1 million times more advanced. In 30 years, 1 billion times more advanced. In 40 years, 1 trillion times more technologically advanced. Perhaps the concealed prophecies are about to reveal themselves. And you can go to the next slide. In Matthew 24:37, verse 39, it reads, "As in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Can you see the picture in the back? I don't know if it's coming out. It's a picture of some men reaching for the ark on a rock, and the ark is floating away. We don't want to be those men, on the last rock with the flood coming up to us. The Bible does not go into thick detail about what occurred before the flood. We can use our increased knowledge to understand what occurred. As in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So what do we know about the days of Noah? What was the primary cause of the destruction of the world? As we know, the world was evil, violent, and full of sin. And in Genesis 6:1-4, it says, when human beings, and this is really about the pre-society before the flood of Noah. This is really the only passage that it goes into detail about, really. I mean, there is, Adam, Eve, and so on and so forth, but right before the flood, this is the only passage that talks about it. When human beings began to increase in number on earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are not mortal. Their days will be 120 years. And that's why today it's considered a righteous thing to live to 120 years. The Nephilim were on earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old and the men of renown. As we can see in that creepy-looking picture up there, we've definitely found these things all over the world. We found weird little skulls. We found, weird little what scientists love to tell us that they were aliens. They're not the missing link. There is no evolution. This was the sons, not the sons of God. These were demons that came to have intercourse with the daughters of men. And of course, Nephilim is a Hebrew word. And this is very interesting. Nephilim is a Hebrew word. When translated in English, it means the fallen. Has anyone seen a Transformers movie? Who's seen Transformers? Right. Remember one of those? There's like 9 now. I don't remember. Maybe the second one. They call the ancient aliens who came to the sky. They call them the fallen. There's a reason for that. Hollywood is in some weird stuff. All right, you can go to the next slide. And of course, recent publications really sparked my attention. As in the days of Noah, so it will be again. Maybe you can't see it, but I'll read them off to you. From the Washington Post, and this is just from this past December. Former Navy pilot describes UFO encountered studied by secret Pentagon program. December 19, 2007. The aliens are coming. No one cares. We have over here March 9th. This was what, a week ago? March 9th, 2018. The military keeps encountering UFOs. Why doesn't the Pentagon care? December 16, 2007. Glowing auras and black money. The Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. And these are all from definitely certified sources. Not ones that I like, but definitely able to reference them. So, I believe these ancient things are beginning to reveal themselves again. You can go to the next slide. As it reads in 2 Thessalonians 9-11. The coming of the lawless one is according to the work of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteousness, deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I don't believe we can begin to understand the great deception that lies ahead of us. We have to use Yeshua as our guide in these times. You can go to the next slide. We know we were all made in the image of God. We have now achieved a shift in the paradigm of genetic engineering. We understand and know that to modify or completely change the makeup of the human being is to change his genetics. We all have a specific God-given code in each and every one of us. The evil powers at hand before the flood found a way to influence mankind into this demonic inhuman infusion. Either by technology or by witchcraft, it occurred in the times of Noah. The human race transcended into something else. And I wanted to read the definition of trans. And we're seeing this come up again, this transhumanism influence, this transgender influence. Where is this leading? Now I'm going to read the definition. It says a prefix occurring in loanwords from Latin, transcend, transfix, on this motto used with meanings across, beyond, through, changing thoroughly. So to transcend humanity is to change who we are and our image that is made of God. I believe this is and will be the case again. We already see the exponential influence with the transgender and transhumanism influence from all our institutions. And even churches are becoming accepting of these things. And for the first time in human history, a pig and human embryo were successfully merged together. That's what you're looking at, that weird little glob up there. What you're looking at in the picture is a half human and half pig. The first time they were successfully able to do this. I want you to imagine what if these things were able to grow up. I mean, they tell us they killed them. Who knows, right? Who knows? But we can clearly see the demonic influence of modifying the human race right before our very eyes. We know we were created in the image of God. The world has reached a point where genetic modification can quote-unquote perfect the human being. Before the flood, the Nephilim demons found a way to break through the dimension. They married the daughters of men and created a new race. And of course, you can go to the next slide now. Now, when God starts to manifest his plans, and his plans start to increase, the devil tries to counter God with many plans of his own, of course we know, which will ultimately fail. In Matthew 12:32, it says, "Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that the summer is near." The fig tree has always resembled the Jewish people. Yeshua is prophesying and in plain words is saying, when Israel returns, look for my coming. Well, Israel returned in 1948. As I said before, when God starts to move, the devil tries to counter God in many ways, all of which will ultimately fail. You can go to the next slide. I know a lot of people are going to like this one. In 1954, 12 nations came together to build what would eventually be the biggest machine ever built in human history. Now, that's a significant number. I want you to consider this, 12. And I'm not trying to, point you towards any conspiracies or anything. I'm just trying to present to you what is happening in our world to make you realize the times we are approaching. And does anyone know any other 12 tribes that started something before the 12 tribes of Israel? Yeah. It's significant that 12 nations started this. In 1954, 12 nations came together to build what would eventually be the biggest machine in human history. The Large Hadron Collider is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. CERN, which stands for European Organization for Nuclear Research, built a circular tunnel that extends 17 miles. And it has 17 miles of extremely intense magnets that shoot proton particles at each other at almost the speed of light. The particles collide and recreate the scenario of the Big Bang. Essentially, going back in time, scientists are able to see what occurred milliseconds after the creation of the universe. Interestingly enough, at the service level of the entrance of the underground facility, over here, stands a statue of the Indian god Shiva. Shiva is seen coming through the dimension as the only Hindu god who creates a new world by destroying the old. Sergio Bertolucci, was that good? Who was the former director for research and scientific computing of CERN, told a British newspaper, a super collider could open otherworldly doors to another dimension for a very tiny lapse of time. To peer into this open door, either by getting something out of it or by sending something into it. You hear that? That was pretty insane. And for all of you who understand symbolism, I mean, either unwillingly or willingly, we can clearly see the 3 6s over here in a twisted version of them. Okay, you can go to the next slide. We all know and understand the knowledge of this world is increasing. But our hope is not in the increased knowledge of man, but as it says in Isaiah 11:9, they will neither harm nor destroy on my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Our hope is not in the knowledge of the world. Our hope is instead that the world would have the knowledge of Yeshua. Amen? And let's put an emphasis on him being our holy mountain. Remember I told you at the beginning to put an emphasis on him being a rock. Now let's put an emphasis on him being our holy mountain. You can go to the next slide. I know Noah's going to enjoy this one. He likes researching all about Nimrod. We all know the story of Babel, right? Everyone know the story of Babel? Is everyone awake? No. The known world had come together to build a tower of which its top would be the heavens. In Genesis 11:6 it says, and the Lord said, indeed the people are one and they all have one language. And this is what they began to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. God himself gives the assurance that if humanity attempts to reach the heavens, and not necessarily God's heaven, that he can accomplish it. And of course we know that God is the creator of time and space. God is the creator of all things. However, we know the universe is a self-running organism and was created by God. The universe is not God. God is greater and is beyond the vastness of his creation. To open up the heavens of this earth is to open up the gates of hell. This was the established system that Nimrod, the man you see in that picture, established in his 8 cities commonly known as Mesopotamia. It was a system in which the known world was contributing to the cause of tearing open the veil. So how did this center of civilization after the flood get to a point of collective opposition to God? Let me just quick drink. In Genesis 10:8-12, it reads, Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first of his kingdoms were Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Rezin, which is in between Nineveh and Calah, which is a great city. In verse 9, it calls Nimrod a mighty hunter before the Lord. When the Bible refers to a good man, they call him a shepherd. And of course, what is he shepherding? He's shepherding men. Now here it calls Nimrod a hunter. So what is he hunting? He's a hunter of men. Or this age's first Antichrist. Now Nimrod built 8 major cities. The stories of his accomplishments and false myths of his deity extend to most major religions to this day. I believe that through a beast system and demonic guidance, he was given the vision of how to build a world order that would stand in opposition to the order and the ways of God. Interestingly enough, and this is important, a lot of people don't realize this, both Noah and Abraham were alive during the building of the Tower of Babel. And the beast system in which he established in the world. Nimrod would use 8 tactics or themes to control the world into becoming a world order out of the ashes of the old world. If you're into numerology a little bit, we know that the number 7 is the number that's equated to God. And the number 8 is usually equated to eternity. So here he is, Nimrod, equating himself to eternity by building 8 established kingdoms or cities. Okay, you can go to the next slide. His 8 established cities would become the themes in which the world would be controlled. He would come to establish Babel, Erech, which is Iraq, modern-day Iraq, Akkad, Calneh, Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Rezin. And interestingly enough, I was very happy when I came across this information. It's quite revealing. It is in the meaning of these 8 cities that the plans to control what was the established world order are revealed to us. The first city of Babel means confusion or to confuse. The third city, Akkad, means subtle. The fourth city, Calneh, means the fortress of Anu. Now, interestingly enough, the city Calneh, the fortress of Anu, was the first city in recorded history to be dedicated to a god in our age. So it is from this man in the first city which he dedicated to a false god, which we get all false gods from. He would become the father of all false gods and would be known by many names and in many false ancient religions and cultures. And that is Anu, of course, this false god. The fifth city was Rehoboth Ir, meaning streets or pathways. The sixth city is named Nineveh, meaning of Nimrod. The seventh city, Calah, means strength or force. The final city of Rezin means a bridle or control. Everyone knows what a bridle is used to steer a horse, to control a horse. From this, we can assume that the strategy to build and control the world was to subtly confuse and control with strength in order to lengthen or prolong life by connecting the world with pathways to worship Lucifer or Anu, with Nimrod or the Antichrist leading the way, with the reins of the world or a bridle in his hand. I believe the world is very confused and mixed. We have pathways. Don't we have pathways to instant sin like we never had before? We have pathways that connect everything and everywhere. And we see the propaganda of prolonging your life in many different ways. We see the control that Satan has over this world. The world is crying out for its Nimrod. Are we crying out for our Savior, Yeshua? People ask, who is the Antichrist? Who wants to know? Anyone want to know? No one? I have no idea. It's not our job to search for this man. Truth be told, this Antichrist system has been here since the fall of man and since the beginning of this age. Our purpose is to search for the one who destroyed all systems in Antichrist before they were even born. Even the lawless one to come is finished before he begins. Of course, and in this manner, and in the spirit of God defeating all systems before they come, I would like you to turn to Daniel chapter 2. You can go to the, yeah. Okay. Remember what I told you about God being a rock in our mountain, all right? Daniel chapter 2, 1 verse 3. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to him to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Of course, this is in Babel again. This is the ancient city of Babel, many hundreds of centuries later after Nimrod. And actually, King Nebuchadnezzar, interesting side fact, King Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt the Tower of Babel, or attempted to rebuild it in his time, actually. King Nebuchadnezzar, in the time of the Jewish exile, he has a dream. He is consumed by this dream, so much so that he places an impossible task, that a person needs to be able to know what the dream was without the king telling him, and to be able to interpret the dream as well. All the astrologers, sorcerers, magicians, and enchanters would be put to death if no one was able to perform the task. When Daniel heard of this, of course, my favorite, he ran home and prayed with his friends to the God of heaven that he would reveal the dream so that they would not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. You can go to the next slide. The text might be small. The format messed up a little bit when I transferred it over. That's okay. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, and this is a great prayer, honestly. You want to say it at your home? It's a really good prayer. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He disposes kings. Remember that. He disposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. Pretty profound, I think, honestly. Daniel then goes to the temple guard, I believe, if I remember right, Arioch, who brings him before the king. And of course, after Daniel wisely butters up the king, oh, king, you're gracious, you're amazing, let me put oil on you. All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, in Daniel 31, it reads, and this is after Daniel approaches the king and he tells him that he has the interpretation and the dream. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its bellies and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. Here we go. Remember I told you, remember the rock? While you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue at its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and gold were all broken into pieces and became like chaff on the threshing floor of the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Remember we talked about God being our mountain as well. And of course, here he goes on to interpret it. Daniel's interpretation, of course, he tells him what the dream is, and he butters him up again. You know, king, you're great. Now I'm going to tell you what this is. You're in trouble. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things into pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet will have some strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will himself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of mountain, but not by human hands, the rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold into pieces. You can go to the next slide. What an interesting dream was given to the king, right? Of course, later on in Daniel has a similar dream, not exactly the same, but basically reaffirming the same thing. The truth is, all kingdoms and worldly knowledge and peoples really extend from the kingdoms and the dream given to King Nebuchadnezzar. And now we're going to uncover these kingdoms. The head of gold, of course, as we talked about Nimrod earlier, the head of gold resembles the Babylonian kingdom. Of course, why is it the head? Because the ancient cities of Nimrod and his beast system come from all civilizations and evil practice in our current age. Came from the Babylonian kingdom. The chest, as you can see in the statue, is made of silver. And scholars have taught for millennium centuries that the silver resembles the Persians. And as it does, as it says, this kingdom will destroy your kingdom. And if the Persians came and destroyed the Babylonian kingdom, is because God touched the heart of the Persians, particularly, you know, my favorite, of course, Cyrus the Great, to destroy the ancient kingdom of Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar along with it. Well, he wasn't destroyed. He went to go roam in the desert like an animal. It was also the Persians. This is interesting. It was also the Persians and the son of Esther, known as Darius, or more commonly known as Xerxes, who eventually wages war against our next part of the image in the king's dream. The bronze belly in the king's dream represents the Greeks who corrupted the world with the philosophy of doubt. Eventually, Alexander the Great arose from Macedonia and destroyed the Persians and the rest of the world. In the next part of the statue, we have legs of iron, who represent none other than the Romans, the Iron Romans, who eventually overtook the world and Jerusalem. Our last part of the statue is iron mixed with clay, representing the divided nations of Rome that would eventually see its end in 476 AD. The clay attached to the iron, in my personal opinion, represents the old world connecting to the new. That is the millennial kingdom, that is us, whose kingdoms extend from the previous kingdoms mentioned in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. What a revealing dream indeed. Yet this great statue, made of gold, made of the Babylonians, of silver, made of the Persians, of bronze, made of the Greeks, of iron, made of the Romans, and the fullness of the statue represents the world as we know it. These powerful, corrupt kingdoms were destroyed. At the end of the dream, and you can go to the next slide. At the end of the dream, a rock is cut out of a high place and strikes the statue in the middle of iron and clay, signifying that this rock would come towards the end of the time of the Romans. In Daniel 2, verse 34 through 35, it says, "While you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet and smashed of iron and clay and smashed them." I'm here to tell you that the rock in Nebuchadnezzar's dream is Yeshua. Yeshua is the rock. I'm here to tell you that only Yeshua defeated every kingdom, every system, every sin, every pain, every sickness, and he is coming very soon. The statue as a whole is the world order as we currently know it. And of course, you can go to the next slide. We know we're coming to a very critical time. We know that the majority of nations are rising against Israel. In Zechariah 12, verse 3, it reads, "On that day when the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem," there it is again, "an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will only injure themselves." We can see, I mean, they try to attack our country as well, only to their own demise. I believe we had a foreshadowing of all nations coming against Jerusalem. At the UN recently, where 163 countries voted against moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Of course, I consider abstaining and voting against. I don't know where I heard this from, but you can't sit on the fence because the devil owns the fence. Maybe it was my mother, I don't know. Probably, right? Well, in concluding a little bit here, I'm going to give you and leave you with good news and good news. The rock that was launched from the high place destroyed the kingdoms of old, and it destroyed the world order of now. The second part of the good news is what I want to leave you with today. The fullest of the Gentiles, as it says in Romans 11:25-26, all Israel will be saved. I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced the hardening in part until the full number of Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. Sorry, I'm missing a card. Let me find it really quick. Just bear with me. That's okay, I'll just wing it. And you can go to the next slide. I do believe that the fullness of the Gentiles is complete. The gospel that carried the nations is at a point where it's diminishing, and it must return to Israel. But there's good news. There's good news for all my people in here, because, quite frankly, there's only a few of us that are Jewish, right? How many of us are Jewish in here? Okay, there we go. I believe that there is a mass exodus ahead of us. I do. And if you would turn to Zechariah 8:23, it says this. This is what the Lord Almighty says. In those days, and this is for all of you. This is not for the Jews in here right now. In those days, 10 people from all languages and nations will take firm hold of one Jew by the hem of his robe, by his talit, and say, "Let us go with you, because we have heard that God is with you." You hear what that says? That says that not only am I going to return to Israel one day, fairly soon, but I have about 200 hems here, and 10 people from every nation will be holding on to the hems and coming with me. And that does mean all of you, everyone in here. So I look forward to owning our own personal Messianic Jewish kibbutz, so to speak. You can go to the next slide. So we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about technology increasing. We've talked about the demonic starting to manifest more and more and more. And it's ever so important that we as believers, we put aside the desires of the flesh, and we use Yeshua as our guide in these trying times. And that's what I want to leave you all with. So I thank you, and God bless you. And yeah, the King is coming very soon. Let's get ready for it. Amen. Amen. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.